I'm basically the world's biggest guinea pig. If you're trying to decide between the Canon C70 and the red Komodo, take my lesson and apply it to your needs and use. The first thing I need to address about that previous video is the way we expose the red. All right guys, so just like 6 hours ago, I put up a video comparing the C70, this guy, to the Komodo. I got a lot of awesome comments. Thank you everyone for commenting. We got a lot of useful comments. We got a lot of stupid comments on top of that. It's YouTube, you get both. I forgot one very important point though. I personally like shooting at 48 frames per second. The reason I like doing it is because we know of the 180-degree rule, or shutter rule, whatever you want to call it. So basically when you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you put your shutter to 1/48. If you do 1/60th, you have to put your shutter speed to 1/20th. When you do that, you speed up everything and you get more jittering. But when you shoot at 48 frames per second, you get the happy medium and be able to get slow motion, but still not over cranking your shutter, so everything looks really jittery. So if you put 60 frames per second footage on a 24 timeline and you don't convert it or anything, it's gonna look super jittery. If you do 48 frames per second, you could cheat it a little bit more and it looks a little bit more natural. Now the issue is with the C70, in order to get 48 frames per second, you have to go to S and F mode. When you go to S and F mode, you lose autofocus tracking and face detection. And so that renders the whole autofocus thing kind of useless in this. And it basically puts continuous autofocus where you can move the box around, which is pretty much what the Komodo has. We will record in 24 frames per second. And you see we have face detection there. Go back and forth. And then let's go into our record mode and to safe and fast, or safe, slow and fast, safe and fast. We'll do 24 frames per second. All of a sudden you see we do not have face detection anymore. It will not come up at all. I can still use my focus point, and that will use continuous focus on there. And then if I go to my track mode, have this button set, you see nothing will happen. Our tracking does not work either. First thing I need to address about that previous video is the way we expose the red. Now, just a couple hours ago, I was talking to a red rep. I showed him the video. He kind of filled me in on how to properly expose the red. So I'm red ignorant. I never really used a red hands-on like that before, and so it was all kind of new to me. So he sent me some articles and stuff, and I'll have to make another video about exposing the red and how exactly the sensor works. And I guess what's cool about this is I know there's gonna be a lot of new people coming over to red like me who is new to all of it, so it's important that we know these things because the red RAW requires totally different types of exposing than what we're used to. We're used to working off a base ISO or like the best ISO you can get and then kind of basing our settings around that. The red, it doesn't really have a base ISO. I'll have to dive into this deeper another time, but basically, if you clip your highlights on the red, they're gonna be gone. So based on the C70, it's the same story, the DGO sensor. The DGO kind of gives us the ability to expose for the highlights and kind of bring up the exposure back in post. As we saw in that video, you can only push that so much because it's still a baked in ISO gain going into your file. So no matter how much you try to push it, there's only so much room that you have to push it. When you're working with a 16-bit RAW like on red, there's a lot more room, as you guys saw once again, there's a lot more room that we can push that exposure. So this is what starts coming into play when you're messing with RAW versus a baked in codec. Now the C70 still has a beautiful dynamic range, a beautiful highlight roll off, but you are limited on certain things. Now, again, like I said, I don't really know too many people that ruin their exposures that bad. So as long as you know what you're doing, the C70 is gonna be totally fine for you. It's just for more extreme like color grading or more extreme exposures or situations, the red RAW is gonna come into play and it's gonna let you basically stretch that a little bit more. Again, I'm using 48 frames per second mostly for all my main work. That basically renders everything about the C70 useless for me because the autofocus was like a big selling point. The only thing now that's really useful about the C70 is the internal NDs. If the C70 and all its amazing features are being rendered useless to me, I might as well get the Komodo and get top-notch quality with 16-bit RAW, and actually the form factor fits me better. The grip on the C70 is good if you're doing like documentary work, if you're doing slower paced run and gun stuff. I like to shoot in the action, so usually when I'm shooting, I'm trying to get as close as I can to the subject and following every move, trying to act as if I'm a person being hands-on in there. This grip, holding it like this, or either like this, kills your wrist. I miss having a handle that I can pivot. Also, we don't have cages and stuff right now. That's not the camera's fault. A cage would definitely help on here, but I'm not gonna add a side grip on top of what's already on here. So that's just making the rig extra bulky. A lot of people were complaining about the file size, saying that the Canon's file size are a lot smaller and the Reds are huge. Yeah, having smaller file sizes is really cool, especially if you have to send footage out to clients. But I mean, if you're going to buy a $6,000 camera or even a cinema camera and you're complaining about file size, probably shouldn't be looking to a cinema camera. So a lot of people are bringing up that there's added costs, like, oh, once you get the Komodo, there's a bunch of hidden costs. I've had previous rigs already, so I have a bunch of leftover stuff. I have a CFast card. I have 2 monitors. I have the Atomos Ninja V. I have the Portkeys BM5, so whoever gets the better red control, I'll probably keep. So the only thing I'm really missing out on is internal NDs, which sucks, but it is what it is. But with that said, I do have a bunch of freewheel variable NDs and hard NDs, and there's some stuff that I can't talk about yet, but there's gonna be some very useful things coming out that I can't wait to share with you guys. But yeah, their variable NDs are like the best I've used so far, and they're the most affordable at the same time, which is pretty cool. I thought the flip out LCD would be amazing, but I'm finding out that I can't really expose off of this. If you're using zebras, yeah, but zebras aren't always the most accurate. I rather use the waveform. I have prescriptions. In order for me to really see the waveform, I need a monitor. But I also need a monitor because I'm usually, again, like I said, I'm very hands-on. I'm kind of in the moment with it. It's kind of hard to pay attention to a smaller screen. When you have a bigger monitor, it's easier to get the camera a little bit away from you or just be swinging around and still be able to see your image on a bigger screen. I found myself using a monitor more than the LCD. But what's kind of annoying is I like using all the touch features on here. It's super easy and convenient to use just to like change all your stuff on via the LCD. Now the hard part is like I'm up here and I'm trying to mess with the monitor and then I'm having to keep this out and then this thing is getting away, and so it's just like another obstacle to go around. So again, this camera is amazing, but for the way I film, really in the action of everything, it's coming out to be not realistic for me, which sucks because I really love this camera. The image off of it is very amazing. It's probably one of the best images I've gotten off a camera before for video. All the upsides to this camera are becoming not very useful for me in my workflow. So also with that said, how I was just saying, like I like to be in the action, autofocus is not useful for that. Imagine you have a horse galloping straight at you and it's kind of going all over and it's running wild. It's unpredictable. Autofocus tracking on the R5, it can handle situations like that a little bit more as long as you could kind of almost slightly predict where the subject's gonna move. The C70's autofocus tracking is not on that level. For YouTube, for more of the fashion stuff, more of the slower paced work, the autofocus is amazing. But again, my main money maker is me getting more nitty gritty into specific brands and kind of shoots and stuff. And so the autofocus kind of renders useless there. So you see with every upside to this camera, it's also a downside at the same time. So this camera is just very complicated for me, though it is amazing. All I need really is a top handle with the monitor that sits in front of it, so it's kind of compact, a little side grip just for other situations, and of course like a battery setup. I'll probably get one of those little mini V mounts just so I don't have to swap out batteries as much. Other than that, that's as big as my rigs usually get. I hate rails, I hate follow focus systems. I like just having my hand on the lens, so it's like another point where I can kind of control and keep the camera from getting micro jitters. My last gripe with this, I was contemplating if I should bring this topic up or not, because part of it is user error and I am very aware of that. Other part of it is I've been shooting like this for a while and it's always worked out for me. So for every camera I've owned that didn't have RAW, I'd always just set the white balance to 50-200, and that covered most of my situations. And it gave me beautiful like highlight tones on skin, like saturated highlight tones on skin. And it was enough for me that I could change the white balance in post and it would shift over fine. On the C70, I'm realizing I could be filming multiple clips in the same spot with the same light, not moving the camera, not moving the subject. And from each clip to clip, the white balance will be different. One shot will be really warm, the other shot will be kind of magenta. I don't know what's going on with that, but then when I go in post, I'm like, well, I guess I'll just have to be changing it in post. The skin tones kind of go away with it. You lose the skin tones. It doesn't really change as natural as other cameras I previously had. So yes, in order to work around that, you could set custom white balances before each time you roll. I hate having to do that. So that's just like another upside to the Red RAW. So who's this camera for? Everyone. I think this thing's 100% useful for most situations. For my situations, it would still work. But again, it's kind of a waste of money when for around the same price, I could get the camera that removes all the amazingness that I'm not using but also gives me better image quality and also gives me better ergonomics that are more suited for what I do. If you find yourself relying heavily on autofocus tracking and you're in more well-lit situations, or you're shooting more predictable things, the autofocus on here is gonna be perfect for you. Again, I've been complaining about the autofocus, but that's just more because I'm spoiled by the R5's autofocus, which is kind of like next level. If you're someone that likes 120 frames per second, get it. A lot of people complain that Komodo doesn't have great frame rates. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I don't really know too many people in my field personally that uses 120 frames per second. It's kind of like become a selling point for people that want the best camera, and it's because of the name and blah, blah, blah. Which also leads me into a lot of people will say, you just want it because there's the red name. Yeah, I want it because the red name's on it. If I tell a client, yeah, we have a red, everyone's expectations of a red camera is like 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000. If they see that you have a red, automatically in their mindset, they're like, that's quality. That's the difference that the red name comes with. But on top of that, it actually is quality. You actually are getting quality out of that. And one last thing, to all the people like hating all the cameras I get, who the fuck said I had to stick with one camera? These cameras aren't human beings. They're not putting rings on our fingers. Like, when did this like concept come into people's brains that like you have to get one camera, stick with it, and you have to stick with that brand and be all about that brand? I got into all this because I have these visions and I get uncomfortable if I don't get to express them. On top of that, I like being able to make money doing things that I love to do. So with this whole like bullshit about like you switch your camera all the time and oh, he's on to another camera, who the fuck cares? Go make your money, go make some art, like go have fun, like stop thinking in like this weird like romantic way of like a brand of a camera. And also, if you guys don't really know exactly what I do, I'm not really allowed to share any of my commercial work on here, but it is on my Instagram. So if you go on my Instagram, go to my IGTV, you'll see some of it there. After you see some of it, you're gonna realize, okay, I kind of see what he's talking about now. So just go watch that, and yeah, guys.